As a Linux content creator, I'm basically required to make this video on how to install Arch. There are many times that I run into people who don't know where to start or immediately jump to using the Arch install script. While there's nothing inherently wrong with that approach, installing Arch manually gives you the benefit of understanding your system on a deeper level, which is why many people move to using systems such as Arch, Gen 2, and so on. That being said, you don't have to install Arch by looking into the void of a black terminal screen either. This is kind of why that DIY distributions exist, so that you can kind of install the system in however way you basically want. For this video, I thought it would be best to try installing Arch in a slightly different way than most, yet still maintaining the control of a manual install. Enter ArchStrap, a project that gives you a temporary Arch system designed for installing Arch on any Linux system, such as Mint, Gen 2, Fedora. Actually, I don't even know I'd use Gen 2 to install Arch, but you know, you can use any Linux system you want, like Ubuntu, Mint, etc. This tool is mentioned in the Arch wiki itself under the article Installing Arch from Existing Linux, right under section 3. This allows us to create a tiny Arch system in whichever folder on any existing system loaded with tools such as Pacman, Packstrap, janfstab, and more, which are required for installing Arch Linux to a new system. Essentially, this allows us to use almost any Linux live ISO or system to install Arch Linux. So before I go any further, I want to give a few disclaimers. First, this video or any other Arch Linux installation video is not meant to be a stand-in or replacement for the Arch Linux wiki when it comes to installing Arch. This video is meant to show a complete preview of what an Arch installation process looks like using an existing Linux system with ArchStrap. This is part of the reason why I'm showcasing this tool in the first place, so that you can view the wiki and possibly get help during the process while you're installing Arch Linux on the same machine. Second, this is my first series tutorial or project showcase video on this channel, and I'm assuming quite a few things for people who wish to optimally follow along. I am assuming that you have a somewhat decent understanding of Linux. You know how to burn an ISO to a USB, since I'm just going to be using a VM with the Linux Mint ISO. You're able to use the bash command line somewhat fluently, and you have quite a bit of patience when it comes to working with Linux. If you find these requirements to be steep, I suggest slowing down and simply just watching this video to understand what you might be getting into when it comes to installing Arch. Arch is not necessarily a difficult operating system to understand, rather it's the opposite if you spend enough time using it and learning how Arch truly works. And if you think this install process is too much, I highly recommend looking into Gen 2 Linux. In my opinion, it is far more easier. So we're going to just grab any Linux ISO of our choice. So to get started, we can just grab any Linux live ISO as long as it has a live environment, or, you know, it gives us access to a TTY if you really want to be bare bones. And it has to have at least Git and Bash installed at the absolute bare minimum. And if it doesn't have Git installed, we're going to just use this package manager to install it for us. So we can use Fedora, Mint, Ubuntu. If we go to Linux distributions, you can just use any of these that you want, that you're comfortable with. Beginners are probably going to know more about Ubuntu or Linux Mint, so I'll be using Mint for this instance. I'm going to just boot into Linux Mint, and then once we're in the live environment, I will go ahead and initialize Packstrap for us. So once we're in the live environment, we're going to make sure that we have access to Git and Bash. So I'm just going to open a terminal, and we obviously see that this is Bash. If I type in Bash, it'll just drop us back in the same shell. Most Linux live ISOs are already using Bash, but I'm just going to run Git by itself to make sure that it's installed. But knowing Linux Mint well, Git's not going to be installed, so if we really don't know what we're doing, we shouldn't be installing Arch anyway, but we can just copy this and then paste and install Git for us. But this is going to be a bit of an older ISO, so it's probably not going to work immediately. So I'm just going to do sudo apt update, sudo apt install git, and then we'll be good. So once Git is installed, we're going to head over to the Arch Linux wiki to install Arch from existing Linux, and then I'm going to do Arch wiki install from Linux. And we're just going to hop over to section 3, and then we're just going to install ArchStrap. So I'm just going to copy this URL over here, git clone, paste that URL, and then we can go ahead and cd into ArchStrap. And this is where things are going to get a little bit important. So ArchStrap is already executable. We're going to sudo ArchStrap because we have to run it. Oh, my bad, sudo ArchStrap. We have to run it as a super user. And then we also have to choose a true root location. So we're going to choose /tmp. And I'll make it a little bit bigger so that you guys can see. So super user, ArchStrap as the program, and then /tmp for the true location. We can choose any location for the true location, but /tmp is probably the best for this purpose. So after the script builds the temporary arch system, we will be immediately put into its root user. As you can see, we got the little logo, little TTY, or sorry, ASCII art here, which is really, really nice. And now we can continue with installing Arch Linux as normal, starting with the disk partitioning section in the actual install guide. So this allows us, if we go to the wiki, and installation guide was just there, but that's fine. And we can basically kind of just skip all of this. We should probably update the system clock here in a minute, but we can just skip all of this and go straight to partitioning the disk. I am going to spend some time trying to update where I'm at. So I'm going to do America, Detroit. That's not going to work for us. Okay, so that's going to update us there. If we do time date TTL, we have our local time here, and that matches up. So we're pretty much good there. So because we're installing Arch this way, we can still use a web browser for the wiki. So I can move this here, move this here. Oh, come on. There we go. No, okay, well. And I'll also make the terminal just a little bit smaller. You guys should be able to pretty much see what I'm doing at this point. So we basically can skip all this and go straight to partitioning the disk. So I will still use the CLI to partition the disks, but if you really want to, you can use gparted to partition the disks for you. I will still use the command line because it is a new drive, and I prefer to use CLI when it comes to partitioning a disk that way. Another thing we can do is, if you're in this graphical environment, you can also go to discord.com, and if somebody's helping you, you can just log in, share your screen, and they can help you along with this process. So before we continue to install Arch, let's make sure that we have all the commands to actually format and create the file systems we want before we start building the system. So when I did this before, I realized that this did not come with VFAT. It didn't come with it didn't come with making those file systems, which I remember I thought they did when I helped someone else do this, but it didn't. So you know what? We're going to make sure for ourselves. So mkfs and then hit tab, and we got all the ext4 stuff, which is good, but we do not have VFAT and we do not have btrfs. So what we're going to do is we're going to do sudo, well actually we don't need to do sudo, we're root anyways, pacman-s dosfs tools to give us access to EFI partition formatting, and then we're also going to do btrfs progs. That's going to be for how I install Arch. But if you're going to use ext4, don't worry about that. All right, so this part is optional, but if we want to get faster downloads for installing packages, if we want that to carry over to the new system, we're going to use a tool called Reflector. We go ahead and install this on our system with pacman and run a reflector command to generate the mirror list for our system. I'm just going to go ahead and grab the command that I personally use, but there are other ways to go about getting a proper mirror list. So sudo pacman-s reflector. I forgot sudo's not installed. And I'm just going to go ahead and run my reflector command. And I'm just going to try and explain this in the best way possible. It's kind of long. Do not feel the need to do this exactly, but this is how I get the best results. So I'm going to do reflector. Oh, hold on. Oopsie, my bad. Reflector latest 20. So this is going to get the latest 20 mirrors. Sort rates. So it's going to sort by the fastest. Country. United States, connection, timeout, 2. So basically, if the reflector takes more than 2 seconds to connect, it is not going to save it. We're going to do verbose so we can see everything that's going on. And we're going to do -- save, Etsy, pacman-d, mirror list. And it's going to connect to the latest mirrors, and it's going to get us the best 20. When I did -- latest 20, I don't know if you really need to do that. It'd be great if I could. Let's see what it generated. I'd say that's good enough. Some Los Angeles mirrors, but I kind of want to do. Let's do limit 20. Can we do that? Let's install a man really quick so we can get information on that program. Oh, sort the 5 most recently synchronized mirrors by download speed. Okay. 5 most recently synchronized. So this is still good. This is still good. But I'd like to. This will be good enough. This is good enough. Okay, cool. So it chooses the latest 20 active mirrors and then goes ahead and creates the list. So I think we have a good mirror list to go off of. Now at this point, just to let you know, my install process will look somewhat different from what's outlined in the wiki. Just ever so slightly. I'm installing Arch with the intent of modularity, snapshots, and easy system restoration. So I don't have to install this way, especially since this is a VM, but just to show you a good way to carry on like snapshots and easy restoration, I will install Arch how I usually would and probably will in the future continue to install Arch. So we're going to use BTRFS to come up with subvolumes to properly restore the system. We're going to use a tool called Timeshift for automatic backups and the ability to boot into snapshots with grub, which is going to be our bootloader. This video is still not a replacement for the installation portion of the Arch Wiki, but with that said, you're welcome to follow along with me as well as consult with the Arch Wiki as we did here. So I'm going to partition the system exactly to how I want. So first, we're going to do fdisk-l. This disk dev/VDA or 50 gig. This is the operating system disk, and we're going to just take that. So fdisk dev VDA. If we hit P, the system is, well, actually, it's going to be MBR for you, but I've already done this before. So we're going to G for GPT, create a new GPT disk label, and we're going to just go ahead and create our partitions. So for partition number 1, it's going to be our EFI. So our first sector is default, and then our last sector is going to be plus 512M. It's going to be for 512 megabytes. You're not going to get this when you're first installing. I'm going to remove the signature, so anything that comes up in red, you're not going to see. That's just me. So continuing on. First sector. So this is going to be our swap partition, and that's going to be if our system ever does run out of memory, which this is not going to, but it could. It has a bit of a backup for it to kind of recover and fix itself. So the last sector is going to be, let's do 10 gigs. So plus 10G. All right, and then the rest will just continue on. So I moved all of those things. Those signatures will be wiped, and we're going to change the type of DevVDA1 and DevVDA2. It's going to be SDA1 or SDA2 for you, but this is a virtual machine, so the device is going to be different. So I'm going to do partition number 1, and we're going to change it to 1 for EFI. You can look at all the aliases. 1 is for EFI system. I'm going to hit 1 to make it an EFI system for VDA1. And then for VDA2, we're going to make it our swap. And the alias for a swap is just going to be SWAP. And we have our Linux swap. If I can, let's do it again. So our Linux swap is here, then our EFI system's here, and then our Linux file system is right here. So we're just going to write this to system. And now we're going to actually make the file systems. So for our EFI partition, we're going to do mkfs.vfat-f32, and we'll make it big so you guys can see it. And then devvda1, and then that is our vfat partition for EFI, swap for, oh, there we go. And there is our swap partition. And here comes the fun part. We're going to do mkfs btrfs dev vda3. And we now have a btrfs partition. So we're going to use /mnt for our system. We've kind of gone a little bit past this, so we're about to mount the system on here. For your EFI systems, mount the EFI system partition. I'm going to mount it to EFI, but you can go ahead and mount it however you want, just as long as you follow the Arch wiki. So first, let's handle swap. So we're going to swap on dev VDA2, and I'm going to mount the system to /mnt just for building the subvolumes, and I'll show you what I mean in a minute. So mount dev nvme whoopsie, dev VDA3 /mnt. So I've mounted the drive here. We can just double check if it's mounted by doing lsblk. That partition is indeed mounted. So I'm going to create some btrfs subvolumes. So I installed btrfs progs onto ArchStrap. So that means I could do btrfs subvolume create at for the system, and then at home for the system home. This is going to be very important. And if you're doing time shift with btrfs, your system should look like this. So I am now going to unmount the system. Follow along, just trust me here. And now I'm going to mount with an option subvol ampersand dev VDA3 /mnt. So let's explain what just happened. On the hard root of the btrfs partition that we just made, we have two subvolumes, one for the system itself and one for the home folder, which we're about to create. When we run time shift, it's going to target any subvolume that is named ampersand or at. And it's not going to target the at home, but it's going to target the ampersand here, and it's going to create snapshots of that, so that if we screw up our system, if a update breaks, we will always have a usable system. So if an update on Arch completely destroys something that is super necessary for us to use, we can roll back and then lock our updates to a specific date, which I'll probably get into in another video. And we can just stay there until things get fixed, or until we have the time to fix those issues. So this allows us to always have a stable system no matter what happens. So now we're in this subvolume. Now we need to create the directories for the other partitions. So I'm going to do mkdir home, and for my use case, EFI. So I'm going to do mount -o subvol equals at home dev VDA3 home, and then mount dev VDA1 EFI. So let's do lsblk to see what's going on, and everything is mounted just as I want. And now it is time to install Arch. So I'm going to do packstrap. So here's our options for packstrap. We can do -i, so prompt for package confirmation when needed, which that's kind of a safe way to just check if we have everything, which I'm going to be using -i just to show you more about like what's going on. We could do -k to initialize an empty pacman keyring, but I don't think we're going to really need that. I think we just need to do packstrap -i and we'll be fine. So I'm going to do packstrap -i -mnt, and here is where we're going to install the essential packages. So the essential packages is just going to be base, which that's the base system. So we'll check what the base package really is. Minimal package set to define a basic Arch Linux installation, so pretty important. And then we got Linux and then Linux firmware. So I'm going to choose the regular Linux kernel. Linux firmware is if you want Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. I'm in a VM. I don't need Linux firmware, but I might go ahead and install it anyway. Actually, never mind, it's bloat. I'm not going to do it, but I'm in a VM. I'm not going to install Linux firmware. You absolutely should install Linux firmware 100%. So I'm going to do base Linux -headers, base-devel if you wish to use the AUR. And now I'm going to just start throwing a bunch of packages that I believe are going to be important. So grub, EFI boot, MGR, network manager, And then it also tells you to look at other stuff as well. I want NeoVim. I want fast fetch to show that I'm using Arch. What else? We could do microcode updates, which I would recommend doing that. However, not necessary for a VM, but if you have AMD or Intel, I would recommend doing so. I'll throw in ZSH just in case. Base, Linux headers. Because I always forget one of them. I always forget one thing to install. It's like, oh, I got to go back. I think this is good for now. Oh, sudo. I always forget sudo. I could take the time to install applications, but we're not to that point yet. I think this is good for now. And there we go. So that is all the packages that are going to be installed, and we will be back once it's finished. So at this point, it's now regenerating the kernel image, which will be necessary. We're also going to generate our fstab as well. That is very important. So Arch at this point is mostly installed. If we look what we got right here, we have a pretty much mostly built system. So we're going to come up with our fstab, which is necessary to tell the system, hey, mount these partitions to create the full system, like EFI, like home, like the system. So we're just gonna print this out, see what we get. That looks pretty good. Looks pretty good here. So I'm just gonna copy this, paste. There you go. And at this point, we could just follow the Arch Linux installation guide and continue. Or I guess I will start to do that now. Arch root /mnt, and the shell changed. I do ls, I do fast fetch. We're looking good here. So we're going to set our time zone and start synchronizing hardware clocks and stuff and creating our localization. So ln-sf, oops, user share zone info America Detroit etc local time. For the hardware clock, we can do hw clock sys to hc localization locale gen. Oh, oops. I gotta edit the locale gen. Oopsie. So you gotta do /etc locale.gen. We're gonna look for enus and uncomment the utf-8 locale. Run locale gen again. Just copy this. nvim etc locale conf. Paste. Right. And now we're gonna come up with a host name. etc host name arch test VM, and we're going to also, it may show in here, but we're just going to also edit the etc hosts and just add our new host name here for both IPv4 and IPv6. So now that we did that, we're going to quickly just generate a new init ramfs. And then once we get to bootloader, we can just go and choose to install a capable bootloader. We are going with grub. Now, at this point, I've memorized the grub install command. Yeah, it's going to be mostly like this with a couple of things changed. Our EFI partition is, I used to put EFI inside the boot folder, which is not a big deal, but I basically use boot for boot customization and then EFI for, oh, hey, here's the actual EFI files. So what we're going to do is we're going to, well, grub's installed and EFI boot manager is installed, and we just regenerate the init ramfs. So I'm going to set a root password before we continue, before I forget. And we're also going to enable network manager as well. Okay, so network manager is installed. Let's just install grub before we forget. So grub install target x86 64 EFI. EFI directory is going to be EFI. Boot directory is going to be /boot. Bootloader ID is going to be Arch. And that's all going to work. And I do not feel the need to change anything in the grub config, so I'm just going to make the grub config. If you have NVIDIA, you would have to do a couple of things. So if you're, I'm just going to show this right now. If you're using NVIDIA, you're fully responsible for installing the proper NVIDIA drivers. So be pacman-s. If you're using a different kernel, honestly, just use NVIDIA DKMS. Just use NVIDIA DKMS. and then NVIDIA utils. And if you're using Steam, lib32 NVIDIA utils. And then once you install those, you're going to do nvim etc default grub, or nano, whatever you wish to use. And then you just do NVIDIA DRM modes. Actually, that may be... yikes, hold on. Let's see what I got before I tell you what to do. Okay, this is good enough. So this is the important one, yeah. So you just do NVIDIA underscore DRM.modeset equals 1. I like having this enabled, but I think this is enabled by default. And then this is just for slightly better performance in KDE. And then all of these just help with suspend, which I'll make a video on that later. This is quite important if you want suspend to work properly if you're on NVIDIA. Carrying on. So we do not need to edit this since I'm in a VM. So grub dash make config dash o boot grub cfg. So now the system at this point is bootable, but it is it configured? Not entirely. So, oh yes, if we're doing secure boot, this will be necessary. We'd have to enable the TPM module and then disable shimlock, and that is if we're doing secure boot. So we're not doing that right now though. So now let's do some things for user space. So I'm going to create the user I'm going to use on this computer. So user add md home pursuits, password pursuits. Okay. And then I'm going to give myself the admin groups to be used by sudo. I'm just going to do wheel instead of sudo because I find that wheel, just using that group is just a little bit better going forward for like, systems and stuff, because in regards to desktop environments, they like using wheel. If they see that you have the group wheel, you're good. So user mod add group wheel, and then I'm gonna also do nvim etc environment. This is personal for me. Don't worry about it. Editor nvim. Oh, and then export editor nvim. I'm gonna do vsudo, and we're gonna find wheel, and uncommenting this line 125 will allow us to, or 125, or if you do make the sudo group, 131. This will allow all members of group wheel to prompt for a password and execute any command in terms of administrator. So I'm going to choose to install Plasma and go from there. So I'm going to do pacman-s. I'm going to do Alacrity instead, actually. I've been having a more positive experience using Alacrity. So I'm going to do Alacrity, Firefox, Plasma, Meta. Do Pipewire Jack because I am using Wayland, Noto fonts. That's fine. And we're just going to install all of that. That's going to take a minute. Then once that's installed, we're going to enable the display manager and then reboot the system. So we installed Plasma. Now we need to enable SDDM, and then we're basically ready to go. So system control enable -- now SDDM. Oh, no, not now. Sorry. Oops. And now SDDM is enabled. So at this point, the system is bootable and ready to go. So we can simply just go ahead and restart the computer. It should auto unmount everything, and how I have this VM configured, hopefully it goes straight to Arch. Nope, I gotta do some extra stuff here, actually. 1 second. There we go. Apply, disconnect this, apply this back on. All right, so once we see the grub boot menu, we can be pretty confident that we've properly installed Arch Linux. And if we see SDDM, which we do, and if we're able to log in and see Plasma, and it's not killing itself, Arch is most likely properly installed. We're probably going to have to do a few more configuration setups, but at this point, if we see the screen, if we see KDE, if we see everything looking good, if we got access to our networks, we see Firefox there, let's see Alacrity, bend into the desktop, or sorry, taskbar. I do use Kitty still, but I look pretty right now, it just looks good. At this point, if you have the desktop that you want, if you see everything, you just kind of go ahead, have fun, learn more about customization and installing your programs. But all you really need is a web browser and a terminal, and you're straight. So hopefully this video showed you a new way to install Arch in a hopefully more relaxed but still involved manner. This method can prove to be useful if you're a new user, or if you're an experienced veteran. That's all for now. I am very grateful for the support that you guys have been giving me recently. Thank you so much. It's been encouraging me to continue making videos, so I will continue to update you guys, and I hope to see you in the next one.